What a first half from Darryn Peterson. What a game from Bryson Tiller. Kansas takes down BYU in the Fieldhouse.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Welcome into another edition of Locked On Jayhawks. Derek Johnson here. Thanks for making Locked On your first listen every day. And thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be breaking down the Kansas BYU game. We're going to be going over what led to the win for KU, the continued weirdness of the Darryn Peterson situation with as great as he was in the first half and then not playing in the second half. Elmarko Jackson gets banged up a little bit there too. Bryson Tiller looked like a pro. Flory Bidunga doing a big job of guarding AJ Dybantsa. So we'll break it all down on today's episode of the show, get to game awards, what's next for KU, all that and more. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So Kansas takes down BYU. It was a very interesting game, obviously, because it was one that, Kansas could have won by seemingly 20 points. Like for a while there, it felt like kind of similar to the, I guess it was the Houston game 2 years ago in the Fieldhouse where Kansas just like rolled through a really good Houston team, or the Baylor game from the year that Kansas won the title in 2022 where Baylor was ended up being a 1 seed that year and Kansas just destroyed them at home. Kind of had that feel through the first half of the game, and then obviously we know what happened at the final 8-9 minutes of the game that led to it being closer than you would want or than you would expect to, right? But in the end, this wound up being KU's third most efficient game of the season by points per possession. And it wound up being their most efficient against I guess you would say a good opponent or top 50 opponent. The other two games were Green Bay and Kansas State, right? So this was KU's basically best offensive game of the season, if you're taking into account, the opponent and everything. But it was KU's third best turnover rate offensive game. It was their fifth best 2-point percentage game. It was their second best 3-point percentage game. And you total it all up, it was their best effective field goal percentage game, leading to it being their third most efficient game when you put everything together, right? And that's what this kind of comes down to me. Like, this was an elite offensive shooting performance from Kansas, an execution game from KU. And it's not always going to be that way for this team, but it was nice to see that was in there. And, at the end, Kansas allowed 1.184 points per possession. What the heck does that number mean? Every other game this season that Kansas has given up a mark of 1.16, again, it was 1.184, 1.16 higher than that mark have been losses. UCF, loss. Duke, loss. North Carolina, blown out loss. West Virginia, double-digit loss on the road. The TCU game was actually at that mark, 1.16, and you probably should have lost the game, but you had a miracle comeback. But this was a game that, instead of like those where either you're losing or having a miracle comeback, you led the game for 37 minutes and change because the offense was that good. The shooting, the execution was that good for Kansas. And yes, again, you can't expect to shoot like that every game. You can't expect to have that good of an offense every game. But for a team that we know has been to this point kind of more about, the defense than the offense, and especially when Darryn Peterson's not been on the court, to see that ability inside of them was really nice to see that they have that potential to do this, right? And how it kind of came together became really important too, right? Bryson Tiller was phenomenal for KU. I mean, he looked like a pro. We had our conversation with Bryce Simon. Check that out if you missed it, where we kind of broke down AJ Dybantsa versus Darryn Peterson. And we also, in the third segment of that show, kind of talked about other Jayhawks on the team, of their future or current, potential draft prospects, so to speak, right? And we talked a little bit about Flory Bidunga, and we talked about, some of these guys. And one of the guys that we touched on was Bryson Tiller. And, we kind of got into the idea that, Bryce Simon, who, again, does excellent draft work, is good as anybody, like talked about that he thinks he's going to see him popping up potentially as like a first-round pick in 2027 mock drafts. And you see this game, and obviously there's all these NBA scouts in attendance to watch Peterson and Dybantsa, and you're just like, what if a team is like, hey, I think you might be popping up on 2027 mock drafts, so hey, if you want to enter in the 2026 draft, we'll take you in the late second round. Now, for Tiller, obviously, then it becomes a conversation of like, okay, what NIL money am I giving? But I'll put it this way. That game probably earned Bryson Tiller, I don't know, an extra little chunk of his potential NIL deal in the 2026 to 2027 season. But like, it was such a show because I think throughout this season we've seen it from Tiller. Like, the question has always been the consistency, which makes sense for a redshirt freshman big man, right? There's been ups, there's been downs and stuff, and that'll be the question, can you have another up in the Texas Tech game coming up next? But we've seen the high potential that makes everybody think, like we've all heard the Morris twins comparison, right? That makes you think that next season could be something special. And seeing some of the moments along the way this year are what give you those glimpses into the future. But it was also super important to win this game, and in this moment, he was so good, man. And when Bryson Tiller is super aggressive on the offensive end, that is when KU is really lethal, because it does change what they can be offensively, as you saw when Tiller is scoring at a high level, which he obviously has the potential to do. Now beyond that, Darryn Peterson in the first half, it looked like that was going to be the story of the game, that Darryn Peterson was locked in, engaged, ready to take down AJ Dybantsa. And obviously with the second half stuff, it ended up not being as much to me, where Tiller became kind of the big storyline here. But like Peterson outscored AJ Dybantsa, and he didn't even play basically in the second half. He was so good when he was in the game. The level of shot making and shot creation, and even the one assist he had was like incredible, because he had like a steal before it, and then he's like doing different things with the ball and like weaving through traffic, and I don't know, it was just a super impressive offensive performance where it looked like a guy who was an NBA player that got dropped onto the Kansas roster. That was so freaking incredible. And the whole idea to me of like AJ Dybantsa is still a good player. I don't think he had a very good game, but he's still a good player. But the whole idea of drafting AJ Dybantsa, in the top 3, I think comes with a level of projection, a level of potential, a level of, hey, this dude's a really good athlete and he's 6'9". Whereas the Darryn Peterson, yeah, of course there's more potential there, but like you kind of like, I don't know. I guess with Dybantsa, you feel like, okay, this is a freshman playing who is raw, but he's very talented and skilled. With Peterson, you almost get the sense when you're watching him out there of like, no, this dude looks like a pro right now, And it was just really cool to kind of see that. And obviously the dunk was really fun too. Then I would say some of the other biggest positives in this one for KU, like the defense on Dybantsa was very good for KU. Like I thought it was interesting that KU at different points threw different guys on him to try to give him different looks so he didn't get comfortable at any point in time. It was Flory for the majority of the time, I would say, and it was Flory to start the game. I think there were a few moments where it switched to be like Peterson. There was even a few moments where it was Jamari McDowell, and those were moments that I was a little worried on that he was going to be able to outsize him, but I think McDowell actually held his own. And then there were even, obviously, Elmarko missed most of the second half with the injury too. There were moments where Elmarko Jackson was guarding him, and I thought Elmarko did a good job on him, being able to use his kind of speed and athleticism to stay in front of him. But I think for the most part, like Flory deserves a tip of the cap, so to speak, to with how he guarded him, and specifically like. Okay, the big worry with putting Flory on Dybantsa is a foul magnet, right? He does a very good job of drawing fouls on people, and Flory, like that would be a big question with putting Flory on him, because Flory's had games where sometimes he's gotten in foul trouble, and if you're missing Flory in a game like this, that really hurts you, right? So for Flory to play that well defensively without picking up fouls was gigantic. And I think Bill Self mentioned in the postgame that like this was a big opportunity for him, a bunch of NBA scouts out there. Now they can see how versatile he is on defense. Good for Flory, man. Good for Flory. And in that same conversation with Bryce Simon, we were talking about, he was kind of leaning that maybe Flory would be like more of a 2027 prospect than 26, because if he's a second rounder, maybe it makes more sense to make more NIL money. Well, maybe that changed with this game against BYU. Some of the biggest negatives, just to quickly touch on, the end of game offense was not good. They went from like 8 and change to like 1 and change until Council hit that jumper. without making a field goal, so that was not great for KU. Obviously, the Darryn Peterson and Elmarko Jackson injuries that kept them out of the second half, that was not great. That's just kind of been, I don't know, the story this year for Darryn Peterson, and it sounded like in postgame it was cramps, so I guess I'm expecting him to play against Texas Tech, but obviously, that continues to be kind of a thing this year. With Elmarko, that one a little scary because he had the patellar injury a season ago, and we'll wait and see what happens there. But I do think the obviously the Darryn Peterson one coincides with not making shots for the final, or for that 7-minute stretch down the end of the game. I do think not having Elmarko hurt Kansas more than you might think, because Elmarko has been a good defender this year. It seems like there's one play a game where Elmarko gets beat on a drive or something, or maybe gives up an and one or something. But for the most part, Elmarko has been a good defender in his KU career, and I can't help but wonder if not having another good defender guard out there would have helped you prevent Richie Saunders from just going inferno mode in the second half. But I don't know. And then rebounding, that was not a good rebounding game again for KU. That was KU's worst offensive rebound rate game of the season. And obviously BYU had 12 offensive rebounds as well. But bottom line here is this. You got to see an awesome first half performance from Darryn Peterson. You saw a really good defensive performance on AJ Dybantsa, even though it wasn't overall a great defensive performance, mostly because of Richie Saunders. But you got to see Bryson Tiller, you got to see Flory Bidunga. The front line for KU wound up being huge in this one. And in the end, you got a solid victory over a good opponent. That's a resume-boosting win. It keeps kind of the momentum going, and it was nice to see the offense for KU play a gigantic role in them winning one of these big games. All right, we're going to continue on with our moments, plays, stats of the game, awards, all that and more. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're back in the favorite with the Seahawks, riding with the underdog with the Patriots, or building one last same game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, there's all these fun prop bets during the Super Bowl. You can get in on those over at FanDuel as well. If you're a new customer, bet just $5, get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Jayhawks. Derek Johnson here, and don't forget you can join the Everydayer Club, where you can get the ad-free version of Locked On Jayhawks. You can also join our Locked On Jayhawk Discord server, which also gets you in on the Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. So again, you can check that out in the show notes. All right, moments and plays of the game. I think it was 13-7 at the time or something. But so Darryn Peterson steals a pass that was intended for AJ Dybantsa, and then it ends up as kind of a loose ball into the front court for KU, the back court for BYU. And you basically have a race between Dybantsa and Peterson. And obviously the thing with Dybantsa is, he's this unbelievable athlete, and you would think he's going to win the race there. But Peterson actually outgrits him to get to the ball first, wins the ball, and then eventually moments later hits a incredible fading mid-range jump shot over AJ Dybantsa. That makes it 15-7. That was just a cool moment, because that's one of those where it's you wanted to see what they would do when they were kind of on each other. Then you get the Darryn Peterson drive where Dybantsa was initially on him. He drives by him, and then he gets to the second level, and he dunks over two BYU Cougars. Honestly, probably could have been an and one for Peterson, but that was an unbelievable dunk, and that one is probably going to be our play of the game. Let's be honest here, right? Then I think you could make the argument that this was a big moment in the game. So BYU had crept it to 13 in the second half. Melvin Council hit a big three when there was 4 on the shot clock. Then Bidunga blocks AJ Dybantsa, and then Council takes it the other way and gets a Euro transition score to balloon it back up a little bit and give them more of a cushion before they kind of went on that dry spell. And then the biggest shot of the game for KU actually was the Melvin Council mid-range jumper, right? You haven't made a field goal in 7 minutes. They've got it down to a 4-point game. It's 82-78. Shot clock's winding down, and Council takes that like kind of right elbow, almost looked like a, I don't know, off-footed floater-ish jump shot from Melvin Council and knocks it down. That was a huge shot to make it 84-78 and kind of get them off that block, so to speak. So that's our shot of the game. Our play of the game is the Darryn Peterson dunk over the two dudes, right? Stat of the game for KU, I think you could point to a couple things. Like KU shooting 57% from the floor and 50% from three kind of just takes the cake here. And I mean, in a game where it wasn't one of your more efficient defensive performances, specifically because of the second half and Richie Saunders, but it didn't wind up one of your better defensive performances. It didn't wind up one of your better, rebounding games. You won this game with offensive execution and shot making. So I think it is good to just kind of point that out. And like at the end of the day, making shots matters in basketball, right? What's even crazier there, though, is again, you shot 57% from the field and 50% from three. You did that without making a field goal from like that 8-minute mark to like the 2-minute mark. And Kansas went 4 of 9 on layups in this game. So they very easily could have shot even better if not for the giant dry spell or the layups in the game, right? I think a couple other stats that stick out here. Kansas led 15-5 in points off turnovers. This is not a big turnover game from either team, but Kansas capitalized at a high level in scoring off the turnovers more than BYU did. And then here's the other big one. This is going to be our stat of the game. KU led 11-2 in fast break points. The 11 for Kansas is a solid number. It's nothing that jumps off the page. It's the fine number. It's more of the 2, the fast break points that you allow. BYU came in one of the best fast break transition scoring teams in the country. And so you held them to 2 fast break points. That was something Flory Bidunga talked about in the pregame leading up to the game, that they had to be good in transition defense. And they were in this game. And so you end up turning something that is normally a big strength for BYU game in and game out into a +9 for Kansas in a game that you win by, 8 points. That's our stat of the game. Awards of the game. We're going to give out a non-Darryn Peterson dunk of the game. We obviously gave that Darryn Peterson over 2 BYU defenders for our play of the game. But there were 2 other really good dunks in this game. We saw the Bryson Tiller dunk that he threw down over a guy, and then Melvin Council had a really good dunk as well. We're going to go with Tiller. I liked that dunk a lot there, but both of those kind of deserve credit there. The foul baiter of the game. I'll be honest, there are times where Trey White maybe wins this award, but pick an AJ Dybantsa play in this game. And honestly, like in conjunction with this, we're going to give out a lie of the game to Kevin Young, the head coach of BYU, who said after the game in the postgame, I thought he was, I thought it was a little bit better in the second half. He said the officials could have called more fouls on KU's defenders against Dybantsa. Like, come on, man. There were plays where AJ Dybantsa, there was one where he was coming off a screen and he just straight up slipped and fell down, and they called a foul. I think that's actually a play Elmarko got hurt on. And they called a foul against Elmarko Jackson. It's like, come on, man. There were plays like that where it's like, those are not fouls. Like, okay, maybe another play or two could have been a foul against Dybantsa, but there were multiple plays where it's like, that probably shouldn't have been a foul, So whatever, free throw merchant. No. Okay. Favorite intangible moment of the game. That goes to Darryn Peterson not wanting to let go of the jump ball. That I loved that moment. I loved that moment. The old man get off my lawn in me was like, yes, that is the Darryn Peterson we want, right? Like basically he had a jump ball on KU's offensive front court situation, right? And he didn't want to let go of the jump ball. And eventually the refs kind of got it away from everybody and stuff. But I loved that moment, right? And then the attendance of the game, a lot of good attendance. Paul Pierce was there, 2 Chainz was there, Tyshawn Taylor, Thomas Robinson. I mean, there was a 101-year-old fan in attendance. I mean, you got some recruits in there, Taylon Kinney, Javon Bardwell, who are both committed to KU. But it's got to be Tyron Stokes, right? The number 1 recruit took an unofficial visit to Kansas. He was there. I know there was a lot made about a video of Bill Self dapping up Taylon Kinney and Javon Bardwell, but not dapping up Tyron Stokes. To my knowledge, I could be wrong on this, but to my knowledge, on an unofficial visit, there are certain limitations on what type of contact you can have with a player at a game, and for entertainment purposes, basically, and certain things that you can and cannot do. So I wouldn't read too much into that, right? But obviously, it was a nice game to have Tyron Stokes in attendance for, right? And then last award here is kind of off the wall. A loss that all of a sudden looks better for KU. That would be the UCF loss. UCF just upset Texas Tech. UCF looks like a good tournament team. So I don't know. Maybe that's not the worst loss in the world anymore for KU. All right, let's finish up with our game balls and what's next for Kansas. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. This is the Mazdas moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen. You know, I got to be honest, like, we're going to go with our Mazda moment being that Darryn Peterson where he didn't want to give up the jump ball, because it was so apparent in this game that Darryn Peterson was so locked in. I know the cramps obviously in the second half, and it wasn't great to not see him out there for so long, but like, when you have a dude who was that locked in the first half, scores 18 points, was taking it personally against AJ Dybantsa, and it was helping the team in a gigantic way gain that giant lead, and to have that mentality, he had 3 steals in the first half, like, that just stood out to me as being that kind of, I don't know, like, mentality type of moment, like metaphor for how KU was playing in the first half. These are the moments that remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Thanks for joining us on Locked on Jayhawks. Again, you can check out every episode anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. You can join our Everydayer Club and get the ad-free version of Locked on Jayhawks. We'll be back on Monday to break down a preview of the Kansas-Texas Tech game. And apologies for getting this out a little later than normal. Was out celebrating my wife's birthday, so we have a little later recap show here. But okay, our game balls. Offense. We're going to start with our candidates for offense. I think 4 main candidates you could go with. Bryson Tiller had 21 points. He was 8 of 13 from the floor, 3 of 5 from 3, and he had 0 turnovers. Darryn Peterson's first half alone deserves candidacy. 18 points on 6 of 7 shooting, 1 assist to 0 turnovers. Then we have Flory Bidunga, 16 points on 5 of 7. He had 3 of KU's 4 offensive rebounds. He had 4 assists to 0 turnovers. I mean, that's been an improvement this year for Flory, his passing ability, and it really showed out in this game. And then Melvin Council had 16 points, 6 assists to just 1 turnover. He hit some of the biggest shots of the game for KU. I think Peterson was trending to winning this award hands down, right? And if we did want to like segment it out and say you can just take first half Darryn Peterson, that would probably be the award. It was that good in the first half. But I do think for the entirety of the game, and again, I thought about even going Council here because of the magnitude of some of the shots, but Bryson Tiller was so good, man. The 21 points on super high efficiency, 8 of 13. He was making everything. He was, you know, he's knocking down dunks. He's knocking down 3-pointers when you didn't know what to expect there. Started feeling it a little bit and taking some extra ones that start going down as well. Like, it is so huge for Kansas when he is scoring, and he's been doing that in recent games. He was doing it in the K-State game. He was doing it here. Bryson Tiller gets our offensive game ball here. Defensive game ball for KU. I think to me this one's kind of obvious. I'll say this just to throw out like another candidate there. Had Darryn Peterson been able to play the whole game, he might have actually won this award because in just 20 minutes, he had 3 defensive rebounds and 3 steals. If he winds up playing 30 minutes in this game and gets 5 steals and 5 defensive rebounds, he would have been in this conversation. But I think the answer is obvious. It's Flory Bidunga to me. So he led Kansas in blocks. He had 2 of them. Wasn't a huge blocker steal game for KU. But he was a key part of guarding AJ Dybantsa, right? Like, he was the main guy on him. There were other guys that I mentioned earlier had moments on him, McDowell and Elmarko and Darryn Peterson and stuff, but he was the main guy on him. And Dybantsa did not take over this game and did not have a huge game. And the guy who went off for BYU, Richie Saunders, like, Flory was not part of him going off, you know? So you can't count that as a negative against him. I think Flory showed his versatility defensively and did such a good job guarding Dybantsa without fouling. That was such a key for Kansas because you needed Bidunga on the offensive end as well, right? And that kept him out there. So Bidunga gets our defensive game ball. Our overall game ball for the game, I mean, honestly, you could argue Flory, right? If we're talking, he's the defensive game ball. He has 4 assists to 0 turnovers, 5 of 7 from the floor. Had, 6 rebounds for the game. But I still think the overall game ball might go to Bryson Tiller. It was that much of a lift to KU to have him do what he did and show out like he did and how good he looked. So Honestly, let's just give the overall game ball to the KU front court. I think that's kind of deserved here, and kind of double down with Tiller and Bidunga. All right, what's next for KU? They're at Texas Tech on Monday. Short turnaround, which is not ideal given how high you probably are after this, and also given the fact that, you know, with Elmarko and Peterson in the second half, you don't know what the availability will be on such a short turnaround. Plus, Tech is coming off a loss, so they're going to be fired up to get that taste out of their mouth. So that'll be a tough one. And then next Saturday versus Utah, that should be your most winnable game remaining on the schedule, so take care of business there. And then the following week, that is the tough one, right? Versus Arizona and at Iowa State. If you go 1-1 that week, I think you're feeling pretty good about that, right? And I kind of said coming into this 5-game stretch that started with the BYU game, can you go 3-2? 3-2 would be a solid mark, right? So you need to go 2-2 from here to kind of get that done, right? And you should be able to beat Utah. If you can win in Lubbock, you're going to be feeling really good, because then if you could get to 3-1 in this next 4, you're going to feel, on cloud 9. So if you can win in Lubbock, that becomes a huge opportunity to make this team feel like, I'll say this, I haven't been overly thinking about, could you win the Big 12, because Arizona is just kind of seemingly to me running away with it right now. If you win in Tech and beat Arizona at home, then we can have that conversation. So, all right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We'll see you Monday for a KU Texas Tech preview, and then we'll be back to break down the game afterwards right here on Locked On Jayhawks. See you next time.